Stokes is onside. 1-0.
Here's Sims. It's a good serve this from Southampton. They could finish the job here. It's Shane Long, and he has done it. Just a minute to play. That's stoppage time. Here's Letizia. Who better to say farewell than one of the finest players ever to wear the red and white.
Hello and welcome to the Saints FC podcast. I believe it's episode 91 now. I am John Bailey, and this evening with me tonight I have Tom Parker. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, been better Saints-wise, haven't we, John?
Yes, we're going to get on to that, aren't we? So strap yourselves in, because we decided not to do a podcast last week. Combination of teething babies, dreadful football, and we just never kind of quite got the opportunity to do it between those parental responsibilities. And I'm sure if Saints had beaten Palace 8-0, we might have managed to kind of carve out the time, but didn't quite manage it. So, which means we've got three results to get through: the loss to Palace, the loss to Brentford, and the loss to Spurs. So three big L's. Before we get on to that, Tom, lots of our listeners are fans of fancy Premier League football, and we have a Saints FC podcast Amigos League. So, and I don't know where you're listening to this, listener, but grab a pen, or probably best thing to do is actually just go to the Saints FC podcast at Twitter, and you can find the league code. But if you're not on Twitter, here's the code for you. So the normal fancy Premier League football place, enter the league code number 5. RW0GA. So that's 5RW0GA, and then you can join the Saints FC Amigos Podcast League. And Tom, I think we've got, you're not much of a fancy football player, are you?
Well, I'm not, because every time I speak to people about it, it basically sounds like you're taking on a second job. Is it that bad? I mean, we'll actually do it if it's doable.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways to play it. So I think some people do take it on as a second job, and actually some people probably spend more time being a bit fastidious about, their second job here in terms of managing their fancy football team. They do probably about their real job. But I managed to do it, Tom. We've got 120 something people in the podcast Amigos League. I'm not quite in the top 10. I'm number 11th. But that's not bad after 2 weeks.
A girl in my team who reports into me was telling me with glee earlier that she has Son and Kane in her fantasy team. It's not good. You've got annual review coming up in October. Yeah. It's not the sort of, content that I want to hear. But,
no.
Yeah, all right, John, you've convinced me. I'm in.
Okay. At the moment, a chap called Matthew Moody is winning, and his team name is Lord of the Ings.
Oh,
yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, there's quite a few Lord of the Ings, actually. Lots of kind of Ings-based puns. Don't Wreck It, Ralph. PK Blinders. Show Me the Manet. What else? Another Lord of the Ings. This is Ingsland. Che Dream Believers, like that name.
That is very good, yeah.
Yeah, Bed and Erect.
Very topical.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, there's some other good ones here. Lalanas in Pajamas. That's quite good.
Yeah, that is good.
Romeo and Juliet.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's more entertaining than watching Saints at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Cool Run Ings, Stranger Ings, Wind Beneath My Ings. I think Ings is probably the Jar Jar Winks. There we go. Anyway, right, that's the fun part of the podcast over. So if you want to join the Saints FC Podcast League on the fantasy football, it's 5RW0GA, and we might even rustle up a prize by the end of the season, and hopefully Tom can be persuaded to put his team in as well.
Yeah, I will do. I'll do it. I'm off to the Isle of Wight this weekend, John. That'll give me the time to do it. So, yeah.
You're off to the Isle of Wight? Oh.
Yeah, holiday. We're meant to go to Portugal tomorrow. Cancelled. Going to the Isle of Wight instead.
Oh, mate. It's just as hot, and the pastel donatas are not quite as good, but there we go. Right, so Tom, should we deal with this in chronological order? Quick bit on Palace, quick bit on Brentford, and then pick up the pieces of the Spurs game?
Yeah, because it's all building towards that Spurs game, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Palace away, we lost 1-0. Zaha scored a goal very early on. Romeo mistake, which led to Andros Townsend being able to put in the ball. Zaha was at the back post. All sounding quite familiar, isn't it? Familiar from the bad old days of Saints. And did you see all the bits, all the kind of posts doing the rounds before this? I think like The Athletic, Sky Sports, a whole bunch of kind of football news outlets did this poll on which fans are the most hopeful, and the Saints fans came out as the most hopeful. So I think on the Sky Sports poll, 100% of Saints fans were more hopeful at the start of this season, and on the Athletic it was about 97%. So fairly conclusive. Everyone's really hopeful. Why not? Because Project Restart Saints were absolutely awesome. Yeah. And then I think this was a bit of a kind of a bump back to reality, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's weird because it's so everything that sort of typifies Saints during restart, the sort of dynamism, the energy, the closing down, the press, the incisiveness, just was totally lacking against Palace. It was almost like the levels of fitness weren't there. Palace had exactly the same amount of time to prepare for that game as Saints, but they looked so much stronger. Overall, I think probably less ring rusty Shea Adams and Danny Ings. Puts one of those chances half a yard with Gaita, and it's 1-0, and it's not a bad result. But just Saints looked very flat and lackluster, didn't they?
Yeah, I was watching this one with my brother, and he said of Gaita, he always makes 2 good saves in a game. That's his quota. And I think this is probably the problem from Saints, the fact that 90 minutes of football against Palace, and we only had 2 decent chances where we asked the question. One of those, like literally right at the death of the game, with Ings' header. His save from Adams was pretty good because the ball came at him quite fast, but both of those chances, you want to be putting it a little bit further away from the keeper.
Well, that's Shea Adams, isn't it? Kind of not all over. That's a bit harsh, but it's almost, it seems one of those players, isn't it, where it is always a few yards either side, but it just isn't enough.
Yeah. I think we'll talk about Adams. Just seems to be like the unluckiest striker, doesn't he? I thought we'd kind of dealt with that in Project Restart, but he seems to be kind of suffering those same, injustices of chance. Do you know what I mean? Like he's having enough shots that you would have expected him to have scored by now already, but they're just not happening. And we saw that, for a long part of last season. Hopefully, it won't take him as long to get off the mark this season.
There was we'll come to it maybe, John, but there was a point about why Saints should be optimistic. I'm going to try and find the tweet why Saints fans still be optimistic despite their opening 3 games. But I'll find it.
Is this following the Palace game or following all 3 games?
Following all 3 games.
Okay.
I will try and find it.
Well, dig that out, Tom, because I think there's a couple of other bits as well which we need to pick out from the Palace game, which then make more sense when we're talking about the Brentford and Tottenham games, and we kind of build up. I think it's almost like if we're gonna have a thesis here, and we're gonna build up to a bit of a Saints analysis. There were a couple of warning shots as well. So Zaha's offside goal. So do you remember this one, Tom? So the Saints players were pretty much standing on half time. On the halfway line.
Didn't he do this twice, didn't he, in quick succession?
Yeah.
He got away.
Yeah.
One he spanked wide horribly. And then the other, it was given. I think this new offside rule is terrifying.
Yeah.
Isn't it? This kind of like, we're only going to raise the flag once you've scored.
I kind of get it, because obviously one of the things that VAR is much better at than any human being could ever be is offside, because you can draw those lines on the pitch and you can get it, to someone's arse was slightly, a millimetre further ahead, which is that's the rule, and they can get it absolutely bang on with VAR.
Well, there's probably a strong argument now that linesmen shouldn't even bother doing offside.
No,
and they should be looking for somebody else because, what's the point? But it is hairy. But you're right. It was all there against Palace, wasn't it, John? That Zaha playing that high line, and Saints. Whilst we have some pacey fullbacks, I don't think you could argue that Stevens or Bednarek is a pacey centre back.
No,
pacey centre backs are quite rare, and they did it twice against us.
Yeah,
with Zaha,
which I think is a bit of a warning shot, isn't it? Because we all know what happened in the game against Tottenham, and there was another thing as well here, which I noticed. Say, Alex McCarthy, I think, is being asked to play what Ralph would call a libero, which is basically, I think, the Italian word for sweeper. And it's kind of when you're asking your goalkeeper to be the sweeper, so picking up the loose balls that go over the top and being an extra defender. And he's doing that sometimes, but for the shot that Zaha didn't put away when he kind of broke through, I thought McCarthy should have come for that. And he kind of did, and then he retreated. And I don't know whether he just thought, Zaha's quicker than me, I'm not going to get stuck in this race. But there's been a few times where I think McCarthy has, he's taken to that libero sort of role, come out a few times when I've thought, oof, did you really need to come out there? And then there's been a couple of times where he's not come out, and I've thought, actually, that's where you want your keeper charging forward, because that gives you a better chance of stopping that attack turning into a goal.
And against Tottenham, we'll come to Tottenham, but for Son's first goal, I think he did a combination of the two, where he came out and then panicked or whatever he did, and then, but because he'd come out, he then couldn't really set himself up for the save, I felt. So he almost, you get the worst of both worlds.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, Zaha, that game should have ended 3-0.
Yeah. And I think probably what is most disappointing about that, and we've talked about Saints' opening day record before. I mean, people kind of like maybe pick on the last 20 odd years because you're looking at the Premier League. I mean, I think we've won 3 times in the Premier League era, but that Saints home record, or that win record from the first game of the season, goes back to like the 1950s, before we kind of actually had anything approaching a normal win rate. So, that happens. But then Palace away, we're normally quite good at. We won there 2-0 last season. So if there was going to be a time to break
we've got a pretty good record. I mean, even I think Mark Hughes led us to victory.
Yeah.
At Palace.
Yeah. I think I watched a rare Pellegrino win at Palace, I think.
I think I was there for Palace when we looked like we'd signed, I've spoken about this before, the 2 best players in the world in Wesley Hoyt and Mario Lemina.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh my God, it's like Beckenbauer and Patrick Vieira, but turned out we hadn't. So it's a ground with good hunting, for Saints, and also it was a game you probably look at and go, Palace ended last season terribly. They made some smart signings, but it was a game where you thought, I'm not a gambling man, but you'd think, God, Saints should get 3 points here.
Yeah. Kudos to Roy Hodgson as well. I mean, that man is still knocking out a career as a decent football manager, and well into his 70s, Tom. I mean, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? Still manages to get the result, get the business done, doesn't he?
Yeah, but you're not there. If you think about it, like he's 72 or something. How old is Roy Hodgson? Yeah, he's got to be in his 70s.
Yeah. You make your point, Tom. I'll look up his age.
He was born 1947, so no one can work that out.
73 years old.
73 years old. And, you don't still get these jobs. He's managed, I'm looking here, 16 different teams in 8 countries. You don't keep getting jobs unless you're really good. And also, he's done far better with Palace than he ever really should have done, considering the amount of investment they've made in the team. And, you look last year, their top goal scorer, I think, had 6 goals. I think so. They don't have natural goal scorers, so it's incredible what he's done. He's just a very smart manager, isn't he?
Yeah, I guess he's able to kind of keep up with the times as well, which is quite important. And we've seen much younger managers start to look much more like dinosaurs long before Roy Hodgson ever will. Anyway, so let's move on from Palace. And, this isn't the Roy Hodgson fan podcast. So thanks, Roy. We'll move on now. We're not going to talk about you again until later in the season. And we have Brentford at home, you think. League Cup, early round. Play our stronger side. It's going to be good for match fitness. It's, let's get some confidence. Let's get some goals. And this is probably my least favourite of the three performances, actually, Tom, which kind of sounds a bit mad when we consider that we conceded 5 goals on Sunday. But this game was really, really bad. I was very upset by how exposed we were by Brentford's attacking play. And I was very upset by how flat we were going forward. I think, we were kind of tactically inept in this game. And, I can take a loss where, you've absolutely battered the opposition. You've had loads of chances. Their keepers had a blinder, world-class performance or something like that. But there was none of that in this game, really. I mean, Adams hit the post, and then I don't think I can really think of another chance, really, in the whole game.
No, well, Dannings, if he'd connected, you'd argue, that was
what the Gaza Euro '96 one, except it.
Yeah, it just second minute, but it was awful. I mean, I think, I think you and I were talking at the time. We said it's probably the worst performance since the Everton game because, while Saints will lose by bigger margins, as they then showed a few days later, the only thing you can't, footballers are like anyone, you imagine, and everyone has a bad day at the office occasionally. But what always baffles me is there are 11 of them there. There is a manager there, and there is another, 7 on the subs bench, 6 possible subs. How do they all have a bad day? Collective. It's a fascinating phenomenon of team sport. I don't watch golf, but one of the things I find fascinating at golf is like the mental resilience, because you're doing it by yourself, or tennis. You have no one else to pick you up and tell you it's all going to be all right. And the Saints were a great example of a team that just, they didn't want to be there. It was almost like they were playing in the FA Cup final 4 days later, and no one wanted to stick a foot in and maybe get injured.
Yeah.
It was just so weird. And if you think, Saints have to be realistic. They're not going to win the Premier League. They're probably going to struggle to win the FA Cup. Carabao Cup, the abomination that it is actually a really good chance for them to make some progression and get some silverware. And, the game that it's comparable to is not just the Everton game, but it's a game you and I have spoken about several times before, which is Sheffield United away under Koeman, when Saints had a good chance to go through and they didn't take it, and they just lack of effort and a lack of commitment. And the players should, have held their hands up on Tuesday or Tuesday night. They were awful, really, really awful. They stunk the place out, got made to look silly.
Yeah, it was really dreadful, and it's not the first time that Saints have had an early season or early round knockout from the Carabao Cup. I mean, do you remember the Wolves game? I think it was Bednarek's debut. Yeah, and that was a similar sort of dreadful performance. I remember kind of traipsing down on a Tuesday night, and it just being so bad. Yeah. Yeah,
Saints got murdered. I mean, I think one of the things it does show, and this is not about Saints, but it's the quality, isn't it, of good championship teams. They're no longer just hoopers. I mean, Brentford's wingers look really good, but my God, we just looked off the pace, didn't we? We didn't know what we were doing, and looked like they couldn't wait to get off the pitch, to be honest. Yeah,
I mean, the first goal was absolutely criminal, wasn't it? I mean, have you ever seen someone so unmarked in a corner before? I'm not sure if I have.
It's a centre back. It's not like a little winger that no one's picking up on. It's one of their bloody centre backs. Both their goals were awful goals to concede, and I think, what's weird is, again, Brentford would have had the same amount of time to prepare as Saints. So why do Saints look so unfit and so up for it compared to a Brentford team who have lost who are about to lose, the second of their three best attacking players they've ever had. But they still look more up for it and more incisive than Saints.
Yeah.
And that thing, you can forgive a lot, but surely like the one thing you expect is just effort.
Well, and I think a level of fitness you'd expect as well. We know that Ralph's preferred style of football is a high energy football. The other thing which frustrated me here as well, I think Long and Obafemi were brought on in the 84th minute?
Romeo was on the pitch. Was it Romeo who came off?
No, Romeo was on the pitch the whole time. So Redmond came off because he was injured for Gineppe. He had a knock. And then he didn't change up Teller and Adams until the 84th minute. And yeah, that's the other question. Like, okay, I know what the answer is. But why are you playing a defensive midfielder in a game against Brentford? Romeo put in some absolutely brilliant performances in Project Restart. I mean, I think you look at the Man City game, perfect game for him, but he can go around kicking the 7 shades of whatever out of people, and that's a great job. But in a game where you're going to have more possession against a side from a division below, you need some more creative spark in the centre of midfield. You don't need Oriol Romeo there. And, it transpired. We had 66% of the possession. Okay, so according to the stats, we had 11 shots. Only 3 were on target, and I think only 2 chances were really of any sort of level of quality. So it just shows you that we weren't incisive in our attacking. And you then say the answer to the why are we playing Romeo question is, well, basically, who else are we going to play? We've only really got 2 senior centre midfielders, as we discussed in our last podcast, Tom, which begs the other question, why have we not replaced Højbjerg? I mean, we knew he wanted to be going like a long, long time ago. I think we were talking about Højbjerg leaving probably back in January or February. And
I think he made it clear to the club by all accounts, like, I'm going to go. I want to win the Premier League, I want to win the FA Cup, I want to play in Champions League. I'm going to have to go. And it's Saints and their famous recruitment. Well, to be honest, for a number of years now, they've actually got it more wrong than they've got right. I mean, I was looking, Gineppe, for all his flashes of skill, started 10 games last season. I mean, that's not enough. For a player that's one of your big summer signings. I mean, Shadham's started 12 games. And, that's what, like nearly £30 million worth of transfer fees? Between them, not even starting, 2/3 of the games of the season. It's really poor. And it's not a reflection on their quality, but you've got to get more out of these players. And you can only imagine that Saints had someone lined up and they thought it was a done deal. I mean, I'm amazed they've let Højbjerg go. And I thought, a lot of the Saints fans, I think we spoke about this before on Twitter, were like, well, it doesn't matter, we've done brilliantly in Project Restart without Højbjerg. We don't need him. He's actually our 3rd best centre midfielder. Nonsense. You don't get to be 25 years old, 38 caps or whatever it is for Denmark, youngest player to play for Bayern Munich, highly rated by Guardiola. You don't get to be that if you're not very good. And yeah, of course, he blew hot and cold like they all do. But, if we're a team that's got to be playing on the front foot, passing forward, breaking the lines, driving forward, then Højbjerg gave us that. And, Romeo has many skills, and we're all big fans, but that's not his game.
Yeah.
And the problem is he's making Ward-Prowse. It's making Ward-Prowse look worse. I'm not saying it's Romeo. The system is just not working. Saints have now got what? You've got 2 weeks left of the transfer window. Every club they go to is going to know that they've lost 3 games. They've looked rudderless. So every club they're going to go to, A, they're not going to get the players they want. B, the players they're going to get is going to cost them an absolute fortune because everyone's got them over a barrel. And I think we're mad to let Højbjerg go. I almost think that if we couldn't have got someone, they should have just made Højbjerg stay out his contract.
Yeah, kind of like, I mean, we've done that before. I guess they wanted to cash in. I think there's a few kind of questions which are again, coming up, we're going to be asking more questions of the club here, I think. So the club want to make sure that they get some money for Højbjerg. They don't want him to run out of his contract and then have to sell him for nothing or get nothing, because that doesn't fit with their business model, which is about player trading, and which I don't necessarily think is a business model that works in the Premier League when you're competing with oligarchs and, you know, multi-billionaires who have their clubs as their kind of like pet projects. But the other thing as well, which I thought kind of really interesting about us not replacing Højbjerg, is I think there's an article from Dan Sheldon, The Athletic, saying, I think it was Martin Simmons was saying about how we have like 5 players lined up for each position. Oh, yeah. So, you know, we're not only just scouting, you know, all of our players' replacements, but maybe the replacements for them after that. And I'm sorry, but if you had 5 replacements for Højbjerg lined up, then, well, if Weston McKennie was one of them, and you've understood why we've not got that, it's because he got offered a chance at Juventus and he performed very well at the weekend. So where's number 2, 3, 4, 5? You know, where are they? I mean, the other thing is that they've also said a lot about Smallbone, and they've got lots of high hopes for him. But Smallbone and Højbjerg they're not the same sort of player either. So I just don't buy that. I think you can be excited about Smallbone and want to bleed him through, but you know, for a player who's played best part of 30 games in all of the last 4 seasons, you need to have someone who's coming in who can be, at the very least, a good, solid first-team player.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's madness, and I think we're in a bit of a pickle here. There are some real Cassandras out there who, you know, start talking about relegation. I don't think it's anything like that. But we have got a problem, and it's, you know, if we lose, we've got 3 centre midfield players in our squad. 3. I mean, there's no way you can look at it unless we sign someone in the next week or so. And I think the narrative today changed to, well, actually, it'll probably, you know, might well be someone on loan. It's going to end up, you know, it's a stopgap, isn't it? And the problem is the rest of the league is moving forward at a rate of knots. You know, you look at the players like, you know, Aston Villa are signing, and that's before you even get to, you know, Everton. You know, when they get a whole new midfield. I mean, I would love to have seen something like Saints show some ambition to go for someone like Decore.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of real dynamic box-to-box midfielder. But we're not.
And we're always... Rodriguez, I mean, wow. What a signing for Everton.
Yeah. But I mean, these huge money. I mean, like, but the problem is, you know, my granddad, who, you know, was not, you know, had a lot of interesting thoughts about things, but he always said cheap is dear. And it's true. The problem is, you know, you buy cheap. Yes, sometimes you get lucky, but sooner or later you get caught out. And Saints have tried to be clever, and maybe they thought they were getting McKennie, but, you know, we now go into this season playing a very aggressive form of football with 3 centre midfielders to do it. And, you know, what are we going to do? I mean, if we get next game, Romeo gets sent off, it's not unlikely. Someone pulls a hamstring. Who are your 2 centre midfielders that are going to come in? I mean, you are looking at Jack Stevens playing midfield, or an 18-year-old from the academy. It's criminal how they've let it happen, and it just strikes you as so unnecessary.
Yeah, I think this has been one of those occasions where we've been talking ourselves up a bit in terms of how clever we are, and the reality is that we're 6 points down in a season already, and we still haven't solved the problem, which should have been solved before the season started. And to be honest, could have even down. It could have even been solved months and months ago. But yeah, go on, Tom, make your point.
But was the 6 points down from 2 games last season that we actually got 6 points from?
Yeah, exactly that point, Tom.
So these, you know, we've not gone to like Man City away and played Liverpool at home, and you go, well, we're never going to get anything from those games anyway. Yeah.
No. We've got some catching up to do with last season's team, which is not good. You don't want to be going backwards. Right, so, yeah. I mean, we've done some moaning. We haven't even got onto the Spurs game in earnest yet. So, Spurs at home, I think the first half performance was quite good. There were some warning signs. Kane's VAR offside goal was an early warning sign, I think, about perhaps, you know, the the kind of whole high line may not entirely work for the whole thing. We had Lloris made a really good save from Che Adams. We had Ings with his VAR disallowed handball, which he knew all about. Gineppo hit the post. So,
we did well.
That was
did well, John.
It was a really good kind of opening part of the game. And then eventually, Kyle Walker-Peters plays a very clever through ball. Ings latches. I mean, this finish from Ings is just vintage Ings, isn't it? It's such a relief to see him score a goal like this, because when you've been so reliant on a striker getting you goals from half chances, as Ings has managed to demonstrate last season, to see him get a goal and a finish like this from a tight angle and a through ball was really, really lovely. So you're really happy at this point, 1-0 up, cruising towards half time.
Managing the game as well. Managed the initial 15 minutes or so of Spurs, obviously after having a rocket against Everton, after the Everton game, managing the game, wrestling control of the game in midfield, score a goal, really good goal. And then what happens, John?
Well, then basically Son happens. Does Son happen, or does Harry Kane happen, or just does both, or does
both, isn't
Saints
it? And
happen?
then also, it's a good example of, and I said this to my also the Spurs supporting friends watching the game, and I said, we've got, Saints is all well and good until you break the press.
Yeah. And
that's exactly what Ndombele did. With a brilliant bit of skill, he just took out both centre midfield players. And that's it, isn't it, at that point? And we're playing such a high line. And where are the Saints players at this point? Are they, the defenders are virtually on the halfway line?
Yeah. And I think this is the point that Ralph was trying to make in the post-match interview, is that your pressure's got to be better if you're playing a high defensive line. But I mean, I suppose this is the frustration of having Romeo in there, is that we're not even doing that pressing bit as well as we should be.
I mean, he got booked in after like 4 or 5 minutes, and that was that.
Yeah, which is not ideal, is it? If your midfield destroyer ends up on a yellow card that early on. And this was the one which I was talking about earlier, where I think kind of earlier in this game, McCarthy had come for a few things and made everyone go eek. And then he didn't come for this one, did he?
Well, he started to.
Yeah.
He makes a weird diagonal run out, and then he obviously realises he can't get there. And then he starts to move backwards. And when I watched, I couldn't work out how Son had scored. Because he almost like, well, there's no angle, is there? But then there's no angle if McCarthy has a set of arms. And in particular, if McCarthy has a right arm, but McCarthy doesn't on this. Like, he shoots, and it sort of just goes straight through where McCarthy's arm, you'd have thought, why? I'm not a goalkeeper. I've never been a goalkeeper. I'm 5'6". I'm scared of things flying at me at velocity, so I'd be a terrible goalkeeper. But like, why are his arms down by his side? Why are his arms not up, at least in kind of a raised position, to give himself more, to make himself bigger? But you watch, the shot flies past him, and the balls hit the back of the net, and you see, belatedly the right arm of McCarthy come up, and it was just a really awful goal to concede on so many levels. But also, you kind of knew that the psychological havoc it would wreak on Saints, and the psychological boost it would give Spurs.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, quite often football cliches are kind of dismissed as nonsense, but sometimes there's a little bit of truth to them, isn't there? And that whole idea of conceding just before half time is the worst time to concede a goal. And we've seen that here, haven't we? Because the second half was a totally different game from the first half. The first half, Saints showed themselves to be certainly pretty exciting going forward. Some frailties at the back. I think kind of probably the feeling at half time was that the game could have already have been about 3-3. But then the second half was just dreadful, and we saw the offside trap not working for Son's next goal, which put Spurs on that upward trajectory. And I think Adams had a chance, and then the next two goals I've got written down exactly the same text in my notes here, Tom. Son next goal, chip through ball. Son next goal, chip through ball.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it was weird because... Well, go on. Sorry, John, go on.
I mean, that's a frustration, isn't it? Because you've got to learn, haven't you? Where's the in-game management? So you've had...
But this is the thing, isn't it? Like, we've got one game, John. We don't have a plan B.
No.
You know, one game is to press high up the pitch.
But then the high defensive line has not always been in plan A. So why can't we...
Is this a new thing, this height? I mean, I think this is... I don't remember us being caught out like this
It's
last season.
No, we're definitely playing higher. I think he tried it against Arsenal at home and it didn't work. And Nketiah made a mockery of us and trying to play McCarthy as the sweeper.
Yeah, the libero, yeah.
Lots of the other games... I mean, one of the things I noticed about Project Restart is quite often we'd hold on to the ball a bit longer in defence to try and draw the opposition out. So when we had possession and, I don't know what sort of possession you call it, tepid, or it's like it wasn't incisive possession. They would try and draw the opposition out, which I think you can do when they're chasing a game, and then it gives you a chance to exploit that with the counter attack or by stretching the play. But we beat Man City not by having a high defensive line. We got that draw against Man United not by having a high defensive line. The only one I think you could have gone deeper. It shouldn't take you that long to realise that Bednarek and Stevens haven't got the running of Son, and with Kane dropping in deep and playing those through balls, they were just unplayable for us, and it shouldn't be that way. Why are we letting Kane get in between the lines playing those through balls to Son? Like, we know how good those players are.
Also, Son has scored, I think on the commentary, they said he'd scored something like 6 goals against Saints. Yeah, in his Premier League career. So, like, this is not like an unknown quantity.
No, and Kane's got 10 in 10 games against Saints, which is just like, if there's 2 players that we knew we needed to look out for.
It's supposed to. And also, like, we're not playing with pace. Like, Stevens and Bednarek look very laboured. And, what was fascinating is I watched a bit. I didn't watch all the post-match interviews because, to be honest, I was sick to my stomach. But I watched Harry Kane talking, and he said, we spoke. And he sat there with Son. And Son looked, pleased as a dog with 2 dicks. And he said, we watched in the run-up to the game, and, I knew that they'd play a high line. So we needed to get Sonny in. So I was always just looking for him.
Mm.
But the crazy thing was, like, Kane's passes are brilliant, but they're also, like, you wonder, like, how, they're possibly, like, speculative, aren't they? They're just like, I know he's going to be faster. I know that they're going to play really hard with the pitch, but also I know my bloke is faster. So I just need to get the ball in an area where he can win a foot race.
It's such a dangerous tactic, isn't it? Because it's got to work out, right? Either you've got to nail the offside trap, or you've got to be really fast in the recovery. So a player like Virgil van Dijk would be able to recover.
Or you have a goalkeeper that comes out.
Or you have a goalkeeper that comes out at rapid pace and deals with it. But, if you look at Son is a player who loves to run into space. If your defensive line is up there, like right on the halfway, which it was for some of these goals, you've got so much space in your half before there's McCarthy. So McCarthy's now got to be kind of out like... So you look at the Chadham's goal against Man City. That's a goalkeeper playing a libero position. So Ederson is way off his line. He's way out there because that stops Saints from being able to play into that space. So when Man City are pressing high up the pitch, there's not a huge gap between the Man City defensive line and the goalkeeper, which one of our attackers could potentially run into. Okay, Shea Adams exploits that with an amazing finish, lobbing Ederson. Not many players can do that, and the opportunity doesn't present itself very often. But having all of that space for Son to run into is just suicidal from a tactical point of view. Either get McCarthy right up the pitch or drop the defenders a little bit further back and have more coming from your midfield block. Maybe...
But John, why are our tactics not... Why is he not looking at the Spurs players going, right, well, Son's definitely going to start. If Son wasn't like some surprise sprung off the bench, he's probably one of the top 10 strikers on the planet, isn't he? Like, in efficiency, he's just ruthless. And why have we not gone? Okay, we've got a game plan, high up the pitch. Is it wise? You're not playing Chris Woods of Burnley. You're playing a bloke who is a speed merchant, who's playing up front with another bloke who, if he doesn't score, he can find brilliant, a bit like Rooney used to be able to do, brilliant passes all day long. So what, and also we're playing so high up the pitch that Son doesn't need, the offside trap's not even a thing, because the pace we're playing, the rate we're playing so high up the pitch, the pace that Son has, the equation minus the slowness of our defense. I mean, Son doesn't even have to play in our half.
No, and I think
he can play from his own half.
He was making runs from his own half. Yeah.
So it just didn't work. And the mad thing was we got caught out at the end of the first half, but then we just didn't change, did we? We were we were just walking into the machine gun every single time, and it got so bad that I've never actually watched the 9-0, but from everything I've read, it reminded me of it. Where Saints just trying to do the same thing and getting murdered every time. But
we had so many more excuses available to us in that game. I mean, I think this, it's just there's again, so many questions we have to ask of Ralph. Everyone who listens to this podcast knows I absolutely adore Ralph. I think he's the right manager for the team, but he needs to learn his lesson. There needs to be a plan B. I picked out a quote from him after his very first game, which was a 1-0 loss away to Cardiff.
Yeah.
And he was quoted as saying, "We don't lose a match. We either win or we learn." And I just remember thinking oh, what a guy. That sounds like my kind of manager. Say, we're not going to get down in the dumps when we lose. We're going to learn why we lost and work out how we eradicate that. But I don't know. Can we ask the question, is Ralph actually heeding to that? Is he learning from his mistakes? Nobody's infallible. I'm not asking him to be infallible, but I'm asking him to be more pragmatic. But maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't do that, Tom. Maybe it's Ralph ball, and it's my way or the highway, and I know that we'll win X number of games if we play this particular way, and sometimes we'll get found out, but most of the time it will work, and we'll end up with good mid-table position or something. But what? It's kind of a bit so you look at Saints under Pochettino and play with a very specific way, and it worked most of the time. But sometimes if a team had figured us out, it just didn't work. And then Ronald Koeman came in, and he utilised some of Pochettino's tactics, but he was more pragmatic. So he changed the tactics based on who we were playing. Didn't always work, and the personnel. But we ended up with a higher position and more points under Ronald Koeman than we did under Pochettino. And yet you might argue that, Pochettino definitely has a stronger management philosophy, to coin the phrase. But does Ralph need to learn to be more pragmatic? If we put that question to him. Sorry, Tom.
But he would probably answer. I imagine he would answer the question. The question is do you think I have to play it to be able to be pragmatic? And he doesn't. We are incredibly weak across. I would argue, apart from at centre back and in goal, we have a very weak squad. We have one striker who can rely on score goals, 3 strikers, one in Adams who might score your goal. I don't think you can rely on Obafemi Long to get you goals. We have a misfiring Redmond. We have a wildly inconsistent Nepo. Same with Boufal. Stuart Armstrong actually is probably super consistent, but then if he's not playing, there's no backup. You'd argue that's really ready to go. We have 3 centre midfielders, as we've discussed. The club has to back Ralph with the players, and they've not done that. By allowing Højbjerg to go and not bringing in a quality replacement, they have made his life very, very difficult. Now, one counter argument you could argue with the high line is that we have signed the player to play the high line. We've just not seen him yet. And maybe we'll see him on Saturday. Maybe this is the Van Dijk, the sort of cultured, pacey, don't worry, everyone don't panic centre back in Felicia. Maybe we've got him, but we don't have him on that pitch now. And and it must be it's a lot of expectation, isn't it, on a 21-year-old bloke who's played 30 odd games in La Liga to come in if that's the plan. But I mean, we've said for a while that we lack a plan B, and particularly in games where we have the possession. We've always said we're great without the ball, but we struggle with the ball. And again, like you say, Brentford 66% possession, same garbage. I don't see the numbers, but I bet we weren't that far off having equal possession to Tottenham. But part of it as well is it comes down to ruthlessness, John, doesn't it? And it comes down to, Son is one of the best strikers in the world, and Son, when he leaves Spurs, will probably go to Juventus, Real Madrid, Barcelona, like that kind of caliber of team, Atletico Madrid, somewhere like that. We've not. We've got, and I like the guy a lot. We've got Shea Adams, and that's the difference, isn't it? Like Shea Adams has that chance after half time. It's not easy, but it's also not impossible. It's a low shot from inside the box. It's really well weighted past him, and he hits it straight at
Lloris.
Lloris. And if Son doesn't do that, Son gets the chance, Son scores a goal. Same with Harry Kane.
I mean, same with Danny Ings, to be fair, for the vast majority of the times. He bangs it in. But that you're right. There's not loads of players across the squad that other teams are going to be looking at really enviously. And I know Saints are asking the manager to make them better, but there is only so much you can do. I mean, if you look at last season, we finished kind of roughly the same area as Everton, and you talk about the players that Everton have brought in. Big money transfers don't always work out, but there's a lot of quality there that they can rely on. It needs to happen. I mean, we kind of need to move on, but before we do, I think I need to read out an email from Gary. Gary Seward. He came on the podcast at the start of last season, and he sent us an email at saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com if you want to do the same as Gary has. Hi guys, after a performance like that, I feel inclined to go to type. Now the rawness has subsided a little. I suppose we have to spare a bit of focus on how dominant we were in the first half. Plenty of movement, cohesion, clever interplay. Spurs looked shocking in comparison. If we'd gone in 1-0 up at half time, would it have been any different? I'm guessing Jose gave his boys a right rollicking at half time and reminded them that our back line are adjusting to playing the high line, that we provide plenty of space in behind as a consequence. Certainly Kane and Son made reference to that tactic in their post-match interview. So do we believe Ralph is currently playing Russian roulette with our early season points tally and sacrificing a good solid start with the aim of bedding in his long-term strategy? All seems a bit samey to last season. Post-Burnley away at the last of the season, it was clearly apparent Ralph had settled on a system of play that wasn't working particularly well. Are we going to do the same this season? Food for thought. Very much looking forward to the next podcast. Keep up the good work. I think he's referring to us, Tom, rather than Saints and Ralph in that one. Thank you very much for the email, Gary. Really good to hear from you. And do email in if you want to, saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com. What do you think about Gary's points there? Are we trying to bed in a new way of playing that may or may not work and risking that on real, actual life Premier League games? And we're 6 points worse off than we were in those two fixtures last season.
We have to hope so, don't you, John? Because what's the alternative? I mean, probably the worst thing we could do now is go to Burnley and try and change it, I guess, because obviously what Burnley are going to do, which is they're going to just whomp long balls up in the air. So, I hope so. Maybe it is Salisu. Maybe Salisu is the piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
That will enable this system to work. I don't think if I was both Bednarek and Stevens, I'd be quite worried about my position. It wouldn't surprise me if on Saturday you do see Salisu and maybe Vestergaard.
Yeah.
To cope with the aerial threat, although we know how that worked last season. But you kind of got to hope that Ralph has a long-term strategy. We probably sound, and we might have had a little bit of panic. I imagine Ralph and the players probably aren't panicked at all. They're probably thinking they were unlucky against Palace. These things happen in cup games, and we came up against two world-class strikers, both of which probably are not like worried about their position, but with Bale coming in, but have probably been given. You can imagine everyone around Spurs had a massive lift.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
The forwards are now thinking there's three places. I don't want to be the bloke who loses his place to Gareth Bale. So they've put on a masterclass. But there probably are some positives from Tottenham. If we ignore the defence, we did look good.
We scored a penalty
forward at times. We scored a penalty. As you say, Danny scored a brilliant goal.
Yeah, he found the back of the net three times, didn't he?
I thought Armstrong looked really good.
Yeah.
Gineppo looked good. It's not all it's not all hands lost, but it is. You just got to hope this is a learning curve, and I wonder if you got to wonder that how many other teams in the Premier League are trying something pretty different to something that was a successful policy from last year, without any pre-season games.
Yeah,
which is what Saints are doing. Maybe they would have had a tour of Austria and a couple of games at a tournament, and maybe two or three, a couple of friendly games at home to bed in this new system. And instead, we've just gone straight at it. Don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
I guess kind of like you're looking at Burnley and you're saying they don't have anyone with the same pace as Son. I mean, Jay Rodriguez is not hugely slow, but he's more.
Dwight McNeil was fast.
Yeah. Just say maybe
Dwight McNeil's a winger, so
maybe there's a chance that this will work better against Burnley than against Tottenham. So we can perhaps be hopeful, but we don't tend to fare very well against the lump it forward, pragmatic teams like Burnley, West Ham, Newcastle United. So, but if you think we've lost 6 points to where we were last season, in the fact that we've lost to Tottenham at home and Palace away, where we picked up wins last time round, well, then Burnley is a place that we definitely lost at last season. So here's a chance to kind of take that deficit down to -3 rather than -6.
Yeah, but I guess as well, one way, my worry is that Saints still have, I think, a soft centre when it comes to those big long balls at the top. Bednarek and Stevens have not turned into commanding Van Dijk or Gary Cahill, even like Gary Cahill, like that kind of, Michael Keane sort of good, big, strong centre back at the back. They're still not that player. So in fact, like, my worry is we've actually given ourselves two weaknesses, because we've got a high line that we can't play, and we're still soft in the air. So you worry that we've now got kind of two chinks in our armour instead of one. But I think it'll be, you got to trust Ralph. He's still absolutely the right man for the job. Saints are still lucky to have him, and but the club needs to back him. And we keep banging on about these centre backs, John, centre midfield players. But my God, like, what are we doing letting Harry Reid go?
Yeah.
For $8 million. I know $8 million is a lot of money, but
to be honest, I would have probably
not staying in the Premier League. It's it's going to be worth a lot more.
Yeah, I think I would have played. See, now you're having a go at Cassandra's for talking about relegation, but there's a little hint at it there, Tom. So.
But if you think about it, it's three league places, John. It's £8 million.
Yeah.
So, like, if we get off to a bad start, and we finish, I don't know, 14th instead of 11th, that's your money for Harrison Reid gone. And Harrison Reid didn't look that bad against Arsenal. He's a good player, and I get the feeling he could have come back into that Saints team, and maybe he wouldn't play him against Man City, but home against Brentford, they're giving you a little bit more. They're giving you a bit more forward movement, break the line. We've got fast players, but we need to get the ball to them and ahead of them. And Romeo, for all his attributes, is not that.
No. Tom, I've got another question to ask you, which is kind of an observation from the 3 games. And that kind of, I think kind of in Project Restart with the drinks break in the second half, we saw Ralph really able to get his message across to the players on the pitch. James Ward-Prowse I thought was fantastic during Project Restart as well. But I'm wondering if those 3 games, if we lacked that talisman on the pitch, that leadership on the pitch, or the player who can get the manager's message onto the pitch in a way that's more subtle than just Ralph shouting.
I think, that's what Højbjerg gave you, didn't he? He gave you that. He was a leader. We're very, we seem to be nice guys again, don't we, rather than nasty pieces of work. And maybe we need to learn to be a bit nasty. But then the problem you've got is, Romeo gets booked early on in the game, and he's kind of ruined his effectiveness. And if we work this out, then, teams are going to almost try and draw out fouls from him, aren't they? They're getting booked and just make him completely redundant. It's just a very, I don't know.
Okay, well, obviously we know that Gal and Simmons and everyone listens to this podcast. So, guys, get out there. Let's buy someone who's going to be able to translate Ralph's play onto the pitch. A centre midfield with great leadership qualities.
But John, you point to a bigger point there, isn't it? Which is about the ownership of the club, and what's the owner in it for? The owner's in it to create a self-sustaining football club. Well, good luck with that. Unless every few years you're finding a Coutinho that you sell for 150 million, or you're finding a Van Dijk, it's going to be very hard to create a competing, self-sustaining team.
Yeah, it's a business model which I think is probably destined not to work in the long run. I always feel like as well in the Premier League, every summer, every team tries to take, a few giant leaps forward, don't they? And quite often Saints, I think, especially, when we finish well, we just don't try to improve in the same way that other teams seem to try to improve, to strive to get better players. And we were so much lauded for our transfer dealings. Like, you look at that summer when Koeman joined us and we sold half the first team squad. And you thought, well, what on earth are we doing? But then we brought in Pele and Tadic and Mane, and you look at that transfer window and you just think, well, actually, that was really clever, and we did continue going forward, but we're just not doing that at the moment, and that is a deeper problem. I think Gal probably wants to sell the club, and I think if we can find the right sort of suitor for Saints, then that would probably be a good thing. But it's a different financial world out there now, isn't it? The multi-billionaires might not be feeling so frivolous with their money.
Yeah, and also, why would you buy Saints? Like if you could buy another, I guess because maybe we're a bit cheaper. But my worry as well is that Gal clearly would sell Saints to probably anyone. He doesn't have, and I think, Katrina Lieber has maybe not shown herself in the best possible light in her stewardship of her father's club. And, that means they'll sell to anyone. We're linked to that. The American guys that bought Bordeaux and sort of ransacked Bordeaux. There's going to be no moral scruples about who owns that club.
No.
There's no link to the community. Gal will disappear and be a footnote in history. So he'll just sell to anyone.
Yeah.
The due diligence we know doesn't mean anything. So, there's all sorts of questions. And I think, we are being a bit pessimistic, but these are, this point about our net spend for this summer being is 12 million or something is alarming.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting, isn't it? Because like the turnover from the TV is significant, and yes, they spend a lot on wages, but there should still be a bit of money sloshing about to continually improve the squad. Anyway, Tom, we've been chatting for an hour now.
Oh dear.
I think there are some deeper questions about the ownership and the club's model and how successful that will be. And I think we're dwelling on those because we weren't asking those questions when things were going well in Project Restart, because it was much more fun talking about the football. So I'm going to hope we're not going to be talking about the ownership issues next week, but we'll actually be talking about how the high line and everything else worked perfectly against Burnley, and we got 3 points. Wouldn't that be good?
Yeah, fingers crossed. Oh, that'd be amazing, John. But and that's the crazy thing, isn't it, about football? Get 3 points on Saturday night, and it's all happy days again.
Yeah. So listeners, thank you very much for sticking with us once again. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If you would like to get in contact with us, please do so, saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter @saintsfcpodcast. We thank Edward and William and Ray and Graham and James and Chris and everyone else who tweets us regularly, Dan as well. You've all been tweeting at us, and there's some good chat going on there. So saintsfcpodcast@gmail.com or @saintsfcpodcast on Twitter. It's bye-bye from me.
Goodbye from me.
Cheerio, everyone.